Most men don't realize they're reacting to abandonment until it's already cost them their dignity. When she pulls away, they don't respond from center. They respond from fear, grasping, explaining, apologizing for things they don't even believe in. But that response isn't strength, it's collapse. And the collapse isn't because she left, it's because they forgot who they were when she did. Distance doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes it's her way of watching. Sometimes it's her way of ending. But more often than not, it's her way of measuring you. Not your worth, but your gravity. How you handle her silence. How you carry yourself when your emotional air gets thin. She's not asking for words. She's watching for weight. And your reaction will echo louder than anything you ever said when things were good. There's an old story about Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. He lost everything in a shipwreck. Everything. But instead of chasing what was gone, he wandered into a bookstore. He picked up a philosophy and let go of the wreck. That's masculine power. Not the power to force outcomes, but the power to redirect your path when life denies you control. Most men chase the ship. Few become the man who lets the waves take it. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit. It's not her pulling away that's the problem. It's the way your untrained mind rushes to fill the silence with desperation. You want clarity, you want reassurance, but what you really want is to be saved from yourself. And brother, no one can do that for you. This isn't about how to win her back. That's not your path. This is about how not to lose yourself in the hollow space she leaves behind. It's about standing still, not because you gave up, but because you finally understand that some ground is not worth chasing. It's worth owning, even if you're standing there alone, because that stillness, that's the beginning of power. Not noise, not reaction, just presence, anchored, stoic, whole. You think you're connecting. You think you're showing her you care. But every message, every call, every "can we talk," while she's pulling away, is a quiet surrender of your center. You don't realize it, but you've started chasing not just her presence, but her permission to exist in peace. And that is the wound speaking, not the man. When a woman starts withdrawing, most men speed up. They explain more. They ask for signs. They lean harder into proving their worth. But in doing so, they shrink. They stop being the ground she used to respect and become a storm of emotion she can't lean on. The truth is, emotional chasing isn't noble. It's not love. It's the quiet destruction of masculine presence dressed as devotion. Every attempt to fix her distance only deepens it. There's science behind it, but you've already felt it. Anxious activation in men often triggers a defensive freeze in women. The more you press, the more she shuts down. And then you press harder. Not because you're wrong, but because no one ever taught you how to sit still in the discomfort of being left uncertain. You're trying to protect the connection, but what you're really doing is proving you don't trust your own gravity. And maybe you became that man because you loved her. Maybe you gave too much, waited too long, explained too many times. Maybe you became the man who gave her everything and then begged her to remember. But that's not how a man is remembered. Not the kind you want to be. You're remembered in the way you hold yourself when she stops holding you. You're remembered in how you carry your silence when it gets heavy. Because here's the truth. The more you chase, the more she forgets why she ever stood still. And the more you forget that your worth was never supposed to beg. There's a reflex in most men that betrays them. She steps back, and he steps forward. She grows cold, and he grows softer. She says nothing, and he starts saying too much. Not because he's weak, but because he's terrified of losing something that once made him feel whole. What he doesn't realize is that the effort to repair what's fading is often the very thing that erases him. Masculine power isn't built through movement, it's built through meaning. A man who reacts to distance by trying harder, texting more, offering explanations she didn't ask for, becomes a man who teaches her one thing, that her withdrawal holds more authority than his presence, that her silence is a command, that her moods dictate his worth. And once that message is taught, it's hard to unteach. Zeno never fought for more noise. He refined his stance. He didn't rush to be seen. He deepened his presence. That's the essence of Stoic power. The ability to reduce effort while increasing gravity. To do less, but mean more. To say fewer words, but carry a silence that weighs truth. When you reduce your chasing, you increase your coherence. You become sharper, not colder. Quieter, not absent. And in that stillness, something shifts, not just in her, but in you. She may or may not come closer. That's not your concern. But what you stop doing is just as important as what you start. You stop feeding the pattern that rewards her pullback with your pursuit. You stop reinforcing the idea that love must always be proven under pressure. And slowly, you start remembering, the man she once respected didn't need to chase to be felt. Let your absence speak. Let your silence echo, not as punishment, but as a declaration. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to embody it, and no reaction will ever say that as clearly as your calm. You tell yourself you just need an answer, just one conversation, just one moment of honesty to know where you stand. But underneath that need is something deeper. It's not truth you're seeking. It's comfort. It's safety. It's an escape from the void of not knowing. And in that hunger for clarity, you lose the very thing you need to reclaim, your emotional control. When a man waits for a woman's words to decide his next step, he's already surrendered his frame. He's no longer acting from his own center. He's orbiting hers, asking, hoping, checking. He's suspended in emotional limbo, not because she's withholding, but because he's forgotten that masculine clarity is not received. It's declared. A man doesn't beg for direction. He creates it. There's a name for this feeling, the ambiguity trap. Psychology calls it ambiguity bias. The mind hates uncertainty, so it keeps returning to the source. You check your phone, you reread messages, you overanalyze silences, not because they hold answers, but because they distract you from the ache of feeling unchosen. You become addicted to the search for signs, and blind to the cost of waiting. But real masculinity doesn't need signs. It doesn't need green lights. It doesn't need permission to stand still or to walk. Masculinity observes. It listens without chasing. It feels the emotional temperature and makes a calm decision. Not from anger, not from fear, from alignment. From the quiet knowing that clarity is not something she grants. It's something you embody. You don't need to hear her say it's over to feel that something shifted. And you don't need to keep asking questions when her actions already told the truth. Your role isn't to decode her distance. Your role is to stay aligned with your own. That's how you reclaim power. Not through certainty, but through presence that no longer begs for it. There's a silence in every man's story he doesn't want to admit. The silence where he knew. He felt her shift. He saw her eyes grow distant. Her body present, but her soul gone. And still, he waited. Not because he didn't see the truth, but because false hope felt easier than final loss. That delay is where authority dissolves. You don't need her to say, "It's over," to feel it. And you don't need to suffer 6 more months of slow withdrawal just to be sure. Masculine presence senses energy long before it hears words, but most men ignore it. They grip harder. They stay longer. They explain away the emotional distance with practical excuses. She's stressed. She needs space. It'll pass. But what they're really doing is betraying their own instinct, denying the quiet alarm inside them that's already gone off. There's a cost to this kind of waiting. It's not just time. It's erosion. You become a man who loses sleep over someone who already let go in silence. You start rehearsing words she'll never respond to. You try to reignite something that's no longer there. And in that effort, you bleed out your own spine, slowly, quietly, until you're no longer leading your life. You're just following hers. Cognitive dissonance explains it. Your heart knows, but your mind can't accept the collapse. So you keep one foot in the past and one in hope. But that split weakens you. It splits your presence, your energy, your identity. The solution isn't to close off. It's to close the door gently, but finally. Not out of punishment, out of dignity. Reclaiming power doesn't come from her return. It comes from your release, from saying, without bitterness, "This ends here." Not because I stopped caring, but because I started choosing myself. That is the end of false hope. That is the start of masculine clarity. And in that quiet ending, something greater begins. Respect doesn't vanish in one loud fight. It dissolves in moments so quiet you barely notice. It's not when she criticizes you. It's not when she pulls away in bed. It's not even when she stops saying, "I love you." It's earlier. It's when she sees too much of your pain and not enough of your presence. When you reveal the chaos inside you, but offer no calm to balance it. You thought being open would make you closer. And yes, vulnerability matters, but structure matters more. A man who bleeds constantly, who over-explains his wounds without anchoring them in action, becomes emotionally exposed without protection. And what begins as closeness eventually turns to caution, then to resentment, then to distance. Not because you felt too much, but because you didn't hold what you felt with strength. There's a moment most men replay later, once the relationship is gone. A moment where they cried, begged, or broke down, believing it would heal the gap. But instead, that moment became the pivot, the point where her eyes saw not a man she could trust, but a man drowning in himself. Not because you were weak, but because no one taught you to suffer silently and still stand. Seneca wrote, "What progress if you run every time it rains? A storm inside you doesn't make you less of a man. But your ability to weather it without turning it into drama, that's where masculinity is tested. You can be broken, you can be raw, but you must be still enough to hold the pieces without spilling them all over someone who's already unsure." She stopped respecting you not when you were emotional, but when your emotions became ungoverned, when every silent moment became a monologue, when every fear became a conversation, when instead of protecting her from the flood, you asked her to stand in it with you, and in doing so, you taught her something she never said out loud. "He feels too much for me to lean on." You want respect back. Don't chase it. Don't demand it. Become the man who holds his storm and still walks calmly through the rain. Silence, when born from pain, can become a weapon, but silence, when born from clarity, becomes a message. And the man who understands the difference holds a power most never will. Because in a world where words are used to fix, to chase, to soothe, choosing not to speak isn't weakness. It's direction, it's restraint, it's presence that doesn't need validation to be felt. When she pulls away, your silence tells her everything. Not by ignoring her, not by punishing her, but by anchoring into stillness instead of scattering into emotion. That silence says, "I don't beg for what's unsure." It says, "I won't fight for someone who isn't fighting beside me." And more than anything, it says, "I trust myself enough to sit in the not knowing." But the silence isn't just for her, it's for you. It's the space where your mind stops spinning, where your soul stops chasing, where your dignity stops leaking through endless attempts to fix what's fading. Because every word you withhold in strength is a piece of your power reclaimed. And every moment you sit still, without reaching, without proving, your masculine energy regathers. Real manhood doesn't ask for space. It creates it, not as a tactic, not to manipulate her response, but as a declaration of boundaries that require no explanation. A man who can be still without being cold, distant without being defensive. That man radiates something rare. That man teaches without speaking. That man earns respect not with noise, but with quiet certainty. Stoic presence doesn't mean shutting down. It means standing open, but unmoved. It means holding your line, not because you stopped caring, but because you started remembering who you were before you got lost in trying to be enough for someone else. And when that silence is real, when it comes not from hurt, but from grounded self-respect, it changes the entire conversation. Even if no words are spoken, there's a silence no one prepares you for, the kind that doesn't come from arguments or betrayal, but from distance without explanation. She pulls away, and you're left in the space between what was and what isn't. And in that space, your first instinct might be to close the gap, but before you reach, before you speak, before you move, look in the mirror, ask the questions that hurt, but also heal. First, am I responding to her absence or to my fear of abandonment? Because if it's the fear, then what you do next won't be strength, it'll be survival. You'll say what you don't mean, promise what you can't deliver, accept what you shouldn't. Not because you're a coward, but because you haven't yet learned to sit with the wound without needing her to bandage it. Second, what am I avoiding inside myself by trying to control the outcome? We often chase clarity outside when we're avoiding confusion inside. You might think you're trying to fix the relationship, but what you're really doing is running from the part of you that doesn't know how to feel unwanted and still remain whole. Facing that part requires more courage than any confrontation with her ever will. Third, would I still act this way if I believed I was enough, no matter what? If the answer is no, then everything you're doing is not grounded in self-worth, but in self-forgetting. Masculinity isn't proven by your ability to fight for her attention. It's proven in your ability to stand without it, to walk calmly in uncertainty, to remain anchored even when nothing around you offers reassurance. Zeno never asked life to confirm his worth. He chose position over perfection. When the ship sank, he didn't beg the sea for answers. He stood, not because he knew where he was going, but because he knew who he refused to become. That's what these questions do. They pull you back into alignment, into presence, into power that doesn't need permission. Because once you face the mirror, you stop chasing what was never yours to hold. Her pulling away might not be about you. People shift, seasons change, hearts grow silent for reasons even they can't always explain. But the real collapse doesn't happen when she leaves. It happens when you forget your axis the moment she does, when your identity unravels because hers is no longer wrapped around it. That's not loss. That's self-abandonment. And that's where your work begins. Zeno didn't spend years searching the sea for what the storm had taken. He didn't build a raft from regret. He built a philosophy, one that turned pain into posture. He didn't recover what was lost. He became someone who could never be broken the same way again. That's what your stillness is for. Not to bring her back, but to make sure that next time, you don't disappear with her. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The best answer to someone's confusion, to their silence, to their emotional detachment, is not to react, not to beg, not to harden, but to remain exactly who you said you were, long before they forgot." You don't lower yourself to match their chaos. You rise in your own quiet, in your own unshakable truth. You don't control whether she comes closer. You never did, but you control whether you dissolve when she steps away. And that decision defines more than your relationships. It defines your manhood. It defines whether your center is dependent or sovereign, whether your peace is rented or earned. Remain, not for her, not for anyone watching. For the man who looked in the mirror and said, "No more." For the weight you've carried in silence, for the dignity you refuse to surrender. That stillness, that unmoving presence, that is what power looks like when it no longer needs to prove itself. And that's how you stay in power, even when everything around you tries to pull it away.